Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mind Body Evolution on video. Can you believe it? This is Dr. Josh Stout.
Hello.
We're going to talk about a possible new discovery that Josh has come up with. It's kind of a fascinating story. What do you got for us, Josh?
All right. Well, it sounds really strange, but I think I might have discovered an unknown civilization, or at least an unknown city with its own artistic tradition that probably lasted quite some time. And the whole thing is crazy. How would I be discovering new civilizations? I did it online, buying things online. I love collecting, and I like to buy marble statues because I think carving is beautiful, and I enjoy it. And so I look for pretty little statues that I can find online, and I got one. And suddenly I started to wonder, I'm not sure, but I started to wonder, is this something from a civilization that no one has ever talked about before?
But why? Why would that be even something that comes into your mind? I don't.
Let me show you the piece. It's the only way I can describe it. Okay, it's going to take me a moment.
All right, that's
I
fine.
have to put on my gloves. So these are...
Wait. Why are you putting on gloves?
So these are alabaster. I say I look for marble. These were sold to me as marble, but it's really hard to tell online if you're looking at alabaster or marble. But when I got it, I realized that these were much more delicate. Alabaster is a softer stone than marble. It responds to moisture, and you can get your if your skin touches it,
just
over time,
touching
it can cause problems. It's fine if you touch it. It's not a big deal, but I really don't want to cause a problem.
Okay.
These things, I think, maybe have been around for, let's say, maybe 4,000 years, and I don't want to be the one who really caused the problem.
Okay, let's take a look. This is
all
great.
Right.
This is great. Very exciting.
Okay. So this is an Ibex, which is a kind of goat. It was sold to me as a bull. It is clearly not a bull. You can see the spiraled horns, which bulls do not have. And I thought it was a nice enough carving to buy it. I could see that there was some details. I could see that there was some sort of crown up here that would have maybe had inserts or paint in it. I could see that there were inset eyes. And then I could even see that there was a socket for maybe an attached ear right here. And I thought, oh, those are some really interesting details. I want to buy this piece. It wasn't very expensive. It was being sold as sort of a knick-knack, not really an artifact, not really something that was, truly monumentally ancient, but just a thing you could buy online at an online auction. And it looked like it had been carved well, so I was really interested in the way it had been carved. And so I bought it, and it arrived, and then I tried to figure out where it was from, and that was when things got difficult. I started with figuring out what animal it was and where that animal could have lived. And so I got a line all the way from the Caucasus to the borders of Tibet. I thought it might be from somewhere that had a good carving tradition. So I was looking at places like India, northern India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. I started to focus in on Afghanistan because they really like that kind of goat there. The national goat of Afghanistan is a big furry mountain ibex, and it's a large, impressive animal. And I thought that might be what I was looking at. If you look at the artifact again, you can see this is a large, muscular animal with these spiral goat horns, and it wasn't too far off of the kind of thing that an Afghani carver might make. I looked at pictures of them, and I saw spiral goat horns on Afghani carvings. It was the only place I could find any, but the faces were wrong. The faces looked like goats, whereas this one looks like a human.
Whoa.
Let's take another look at it.
The face was wrong.
Yeah, let's take another look at that. You see this face? It has these big, fat, happy cheeks, and these inset eyes. The Afghani people didn't seem to do that. Any of the various ethnic groups in Afghanistan didn't make human-like faces on their artifacts. And so I started to look online, and I noticed there were more. And so I bought another one.
Wait, you were specifically looking.
I started realizing that this might be a thing. I didn't know quite what it was, But I saw there was another one from the same seller, and they were selling a very similar piece. This one actually was a bull, but it has many of the same characteristics. So I could tell it was either from the same artist or it was from the same civilization.
Was it labeled? I mean, how was it labeled?
Well, none of these things were labeled as, possible Mesopotamian artifact or Sumerian artifact. These were labeled as ancient, but from maybe the Middle East. They might be labeled as a Roman thing, and I could tell they weren't that. And so I didn't really believe the claims of their ancient artifact. I thought that these were just handmade artifacts that had been, well made at some point in time. And so when I looked at them, I was thinking, maybe a 19th century piece, maybe a modern fake. I wasn't at all sure, but what was intriguing me was that I couldn't find any examples of modern fakes that looked like these things.
So, but what was it in that first one that made you, was it just a combination of features? What made you even look for another one? What made you think there might be another one?
Because I couldn't pin it down. I couldn't pin it down to any recognizable artistic style. It wasn't Indian. It wasn't Afghani. It wasn't Tibetan. It wasn't from Turkey. And it wasn't even from Mesopotamia, which is where I started to suspect, but it had some things in common with Mesopotamia. Mesopotamian artifacts, again, they frequently have these inset eyes. They like adding things. So these were insets for the horns, again, insets for the ears. They liked putting human faces on their animals. And it looked very similar with these big, fat, happy cheeks, but still not the same as a Mesopotamian artifact. I started to look at the pieces themselves, and I would see, significant aspects of age. And I started to wonder, are these older than I had imagined? These cracks here look like they were filled with mineral staining, and that wasn't added or wasn't part of the original stone. Now, they could be. Sometimes you get a stone with veins in it and you carve it. But these looked like maybe it had come in afterwards. I could see signs of breakage and wear. So looking at the bottom here, you can see the whole bottom has been broken off. And that started to make me think that I might be looking at something older. But the next thing I did was I started looking at old auctions. And I found many, many more pieces. These were not ones I could buy.
When you say old auctions, you mean
auctions from previous
prior auctions that had already taken place, but there was a record.
There was a record. And so I could look at the old auctions and find out what had been sold. And I was finding more fat, happy cheeks. I was finding more of these sort of same expressions with the inset eyes and the crowns. And I was finding a general sensibility.
So there was actually a commonality between items that were listed as being from all over the place, and could be really anywhere in the world. There was no way to know, because nothing was labeled correctly at these auctions, and most of the things at these auctions were fake. So almost all of the items at these auctions were fake. What is it that made you come to the feelings that this might be a whole civilization?
Well, the more commonality I found, I got closer and closer to Sumerian things. But then, as I studied Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, okay, so let me just state for the record, I am not a Mesopotamian expert. The Bronze Age is so huge. I was discovering new civilizations, not that I was discovering, I was finding out about civilizations I had never heard about. Every day I was doing research. There was some new thing I found out about that scholars had known about forever, but I didn't know about.
So there's a bunch of civilizations out there that we just don't know about, but are known.
There was 5,000 years of civilizations, of which the Sumerians represented about 3,000 years. But they weren't the Sumerians. The Sumerians were actually just a previous earlier group. That's how we know them. They're mostly the Akkadians, following into the Babylonians and the Assyrians.
Which has nothing to do with Akkadian driftwood. That's a completely different group.
So anyway, I am way out of my depth. I don't read the language. I don't read cuneiform. But I was starting to recognize just as someone who loves art, who loves carving, who loves understanding our history, that I was looking at something within this larger Mesopotamian tradition, but not any of the known examples. And let me show you.
What does cuneiform have to do with it? Why do you say you didn't read cuneiform?
Okay, so we know about these civilizations because they left records that we can now read in cuneiform, and they left gigantic records, huge entire libraries,
written records,
and so we know a lot about them. We didn't know about them before the 19th century. We had biblical accounts of the Assyrians or people like that, but it was only in the 19th century we started reading the cuneiform and were able to verify that all of this stuff actually happened. And so all of this started out as sort of biblical exploration, trying to say, yo, Nineveh actually existed. Ashurbanipal was a real king. All of these things really, really happened. And so by reading the cuneiform, people started to figure that out. That's not me, okay? I, just looking at these things artistically, started to think I might be looking at something brand new in the sense, obviously old, but brand new in the sense of this has not been a civilization that's been talked about.
All right, so you said you were going to show us another one.
Yeah, so anyway, I want to show you this one again.
Okay.
Looking at this bull, a bull could not physically lie down like this. This bull...
You mean there?
With these front legs pointing... A bull's legs would point backwards. This is the position of a sphinx. This is an Egyptian sphinx. Sumerian artifacts did not look like that. The bulls sat properly in Sumerian things.
It's a bull in a sphinx pose.
Exactly. And the kind of things you might find in Iraq, you would not look like that. That particular pose was another one of the commonalities. No faker would do that. I started to realize that I was looking at things where either someone was a mad genius who had invented a civilization by putting together some things from Sumerian iconography with some pieces of Egyptian iconography, or I was looking at a civilization that represented where these things had come together. They were all on the Silk Road. Anyone who was making bronze was digging it up in Afghanistan, digging up tin in Afghanistan and exporting it all the way to the Mediterranean, to the Mycenaean, the Greek, pre-Greek civilizations. All of that was coming all the way through these areas in Persia, in Iraq, in Syria. So these civilizations all had blending between them. And I think what this one is representing is a blend between the true Mesopotamian, literally between the river civilizations, and some Egyptian civilization, possibly right on the border of the Mediterranean. I think there might even have been influences from this group of peoples to later Greek civilizations. Okay, but I don't have any evidence for that right now.
I'm excited now. I want to see the next piece.
All right, some more pieces
that kind of drove you forward.
All right.
Because I know that as you collected more of these pieces, you were getting even more excited about this idea.
Okay, so this one is made of granite, and this is what is a really typical thing called a Lamassu. So Lamassu is this animal, human form. The typical ones would have been in Babylon or an Assyrian form. You can see them in the Met. You'll see these large ones that were found in the great palaces. And this looks very similar to them, except again, it's in this Sphinx form. All the Lamassu that I've seen pictures of were walking and have this kind of beard, very typical kind of Assyrian, Babylonian type beard, but combined with this Sphinx shape. And this one looks very much like a Sphinx.
Yeah.
And you can see the feet are worn, very, very badly worn, which is amazing for granite to think about what it would take to wear it. But I suspect that there were claws here. On some of these other ones, you can see claws right at the hip there. But you combine that with these large Ibex horns, and many Lamassu in Sumeria have these horn crowns, and they're formed of several bull horns, all going back in rows, and they represent their gods, their forms of the gods. Lamassu means this protective deity. Mm-hmm. So they put them at the entrances to palaces, entrances to temples to protect the temple. But these horned crowns are not what you're seeing on this one. So going back to it, it has a crown, and the crown is made of horns, but they're not bull horns, and they're not in a row all on the same crown. They're two different kinds of horned animals, one a goat and one a sheep. So you've got the sheep horns right here at the top, almost looking like a pair of goggles, and then you can see the rest of the crown here. So this
looks like a bowl.
Then this, yes, and so these two horns are forming an offering bowl. Many of the artifacts, I was really looking at statues when I first started, but many of the artifacts in this larger collection, the ones I don't have, turn out to be offering bowls. Often with the face, with these puffy cheeks and the inset eyes, of a sort of semi-goat, semi-human face. And that's the other thing I want to talk about.
So you think these were used in ritualized ritual?
These were temple offerings. So these were, and that's a common Sumerian cultural trait, is to take small votive offerings and place them in a temple. So there are a lot of these offerings in Sumerian sites. This just doesn't match any of them. It doesn't match them in detail or the way they're done. So let me show you another thing.
All right.
So on this one, you can see that the face is more or less flat, and that's really typical of most, Babylonian, Sumerian, but it still has a little bit of this fat cheeks here. And if you compare it to, let's say this first one again, this first one, you can see really has the fat cheeks and a human-like face, but it's protruding forward. It looks like an animal face. If you look directly at it, the nostrils are facing directly to you. That's not how human nostrils go. That's how animal nostrils look. And so this is a half animal, half human face, but one done in the Sumerian style, but Sumerians didn't do it that way. When they did faces on their animals, they did a purely human face that was more or less flat, not protruding like that. I recognized it as Sumerian looking at pictures of Sumerian worshippers. So in addition to these animals, they would often have depictions of their kings or of people worshiping in the temple. So you would put if you were a king, you would have a statue made of yourself put in the temple looking at the god. And so you were constantly worshiping the god because you were there staring at the god. And
love it.
Yeah.
Love it. That the outsourcing the work of devotion. That's fantastic.
And so here is one that really, really represents that kind of tradition. And so this would have been a Sumerian king sitting here on his throne. You can see this pleated skirt coming down here. And again, I want to emphasize, these are not the way they would appear if you were looking at an actual Sumerian artifact in a museum. There would be several differences with this, which is why you could presume this is a fake, that an online site selling fakes, selling things that don't match known examples, almost certainly are fakes. And that's why I started to panic. I'm like, I don't know if these are real. I don't have the expertise. I've tried to contact a couple of museums like the British Museum or Columbia University.
How'd that go? When
they either ghosted me or they didn't want to talk to me. No one wanted to talk to me because these things either are fakes and no one wants to waste their time, or they were looted. And then no one wants to get involved with something that was some sort of criminal.
Seem old. The museums don't want to look at them.
Well, they don't want to look at them because that just encourages further looting. I'm not exactly sure how that all works, but you don't want to verify artifacts in a collector's collection if the collector is collecting recent stuff, because if you verify that they're real, you have added to the value of that collection, and you've incentivized the collector to buy more looted artifacts. And so
this sounds like a self-defeating cycle in a number of different ways.
For me, I started to really panic because I couldn't get anyone to answer this stuff. I suspected they were fake because there was a lot of problems with them, because they didn't match things. But I also suspected that they might be real, and at which point I was the only one who knew, and I was the only one who was able to put this stuff together. And that's where I wanted to bring up this idea of hubris, of like, that's incredible hubris to think you're the only one who knows about this existing civilization. And I started to have, crisis of faith. Is this stuff true? And every time I would think these things, I would pick up an artifact again and realized, no, I have to do this. I really have an obligation to preserve as many of these records as I can.
Why was the holding it the thing that?
Well, because I could verify it. Something in your hand, you can tell is different from something you're looking at a picture.
In your hand, you're really getting a feeling that this is possibly 4,000 years old. You're like,
just possible, but yeah, I really started to get that feeling, and
but these are also verifiable fakes.
Well, in the sense that they come from a place that only sells fakes, and when I finally got someone to look at them, he's like, yeah, these don't match real artifacts from Sumeria. These are fakes. And he flat out said them. And with a key point, let's take a look at this one. Again, the fakers, after they carved it, then shattered the stone, but whatever, fine. If you look at the back here, you can see this cuneiform. So this is the Sumerian script with a line between that and cuneiform over here, except it's not. None of that is recognizable writing. This was a fake cuneiform. So the people who made it either didn't know cuneiform and were writing in fake cuneiform, or it was a modern fake, and this whole piece is a modern fake.
When you say a modern fake, what is a modern?
Yesterday through to the 19th century. It could have been these could have been British Grand Tour going through, I don't know, Iraq, Syria, Egypt even. Any of these places.
And that would put it within, 100 to 200 years old.
So, yeah, so I've got 100, 200 years old.
Skilled craftsman, artisan.
Who strangely knows some things. Again, back to this one. This is all very, very classical Sumerian form in sort of its overall look, but there's several pieces that are just wrong. The pupils are much, much smaller. Sumerian pupils on the eyes would be most of that center inset. But someone went to the effort of making a chipped piece of stone and then a center, and then drilled a hole in it and put another piece of stone in there to have the black pupil, and then glued that in using probably tar, bitumen.
Seems like a lot of work.
Seems like a lot of work. And then notice these hands. Every single Sumerian votive statue would have the hands clasped at the chest. And a faker would know that. Why put them down like this? Because that's how the Egyptians did it. The Egyptians had their hands, when they would show a pharaoh or a king, they'd have their hands resting on their knees like this. So while it is possible that these were recent fakes, it would be someone who was purposely making something that didn't look like traditional fakes, right?
Right.
That didn't look like what was actually out there. And so that was another question I asked. Can I go out on the web and find fakes that look like mine? And the answer was no. I couldn't find all the fakes that are put out there.
Yeah.
Look like the real Sumerian artifacts, because that's what they were copying.
So then you're saying that all of your fakes came from one source.
One source that doesn't match any known online sources that I've been finding. I've looked under carved marble. I've looked under antiquities. I've looked under artifacts.
So this would lend
all the search terms.
This would lend itself to the idea that like there's a cache of objects that were found.
Right. So I have pictures of all the ones that were sold at auction to record them. And yeah, I started buying what I could, what I could afford, but they weren't that expensive, because I think what might have been happening was that they were essentially laundering fake artifacts by using real artifacts. If you put things that are genuinely old next to something that is not old, it makes everything a little more uncertain, and it allows you to sell these things that are not old because someone might think they are old. They see something that they know is genuine and they say this thing next to it might be good. It also allows you to sell things that, if you're selling Iraqi artifacts online, you're going to get caught. The police are going to come for you, especially if you're selling, let's say, 40 of them. I think I found about 40 of these artifacts.
So you're saying that they're using legitimate ancient artifacts purposely mislabeled to increase the value of actual fake artifacts,
while being able to sell the real artifacts without getting in trouble for it. Yes, I think that's what's happening. But again, I don't know. I don't want to make any false accusations to anyone. They might be legitimate businessmen.
Well, they are legitimate businessmen.
They also are legitimate businessmen.
But what you purchased are verifiable fakes
Yes,
and have been verified as
and they sell things on commission, so they make no claims about the truth of anything they're doing. They're selling it for someone else. So again, it's like eBay. You can't get eBay in trouble for if you look up Chinese antiquities on eBay, I guarantee you every single one of them is fake. So, and eBay says
that's what they do. They just sell fakes.
They just sell fakes. And eBay is like, if you find a fake on eBay, report it and we'll get rid of that seller. That has never worked. So so the world is full of these fake artifacts, and you can look for them. You can look for fake Mesopotamian artifacts. So you get these very, very good carvings of granite Lamassu, just like I had, but costing twice as much. And they're from Thailand. And they look better than mine. They look more genuine because they were copied from Iraqi copies, from Iraqi originals. And so they look just like the Iraqi originals. But I can tell they're fakes because they're coming from Thailand, because that's not where the, Iraqi artifacts were being spread.
You wouldn't be finding those there.
And they also look brand new.
So
they don't have these signs of age. They're not broken.
I know you have other objects.
I don't we need to show them all today.
We don't need to show them. We will show them. What are the next steps here?
What are the next steps for me?
Yeah, for you.
Yeah,
for us
yeah. So I want to show a few more of these artifacts, at a couple more of these, to talk about aspects of the culture. I want to talk about what a Lamassu is. I want to talk about Sumerian culture in general. I have some things. They did weighting using ducks. They would carve a duck, and that was their weight. I have one of those. I want to talk about that and how they came up with their number systems. We have 60 seconds to a minute, and 60 minutes to an hour, and 365 days in a year. That's all Babylonian Sumerian stuff. We have 360 degrees in a circle because of them. And so we have these things in our culture, and I get to talk about that because of the artifacts.
Excellent.
So anyway, that's where I want to go in the future.
Excellent. All right. And there will be more artifacts to come.
And there are more artifacts to come, because this is a crazy, crazy situation. One last thing I want to say.
Please.
The reason, okay, I love things. I'm not now buying these because I just want to have a collection. I think I'm protecting them. And I want to point out that it is terrible to loot a city somewhere in the Middle East to sell these things. But now that I've found them, the only value they have really to the archaeological record is their context. And I have their context, that they're related to each other. I have the pictures of the ones that were sold, and I have the ones in my possession. And so I have a cohesive collection from a particular site. And so they do still have a context to themselves. We don't know where they were found. We don't know what country they're from, but I think they do have a context. And I just wanted to point that out.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Josh, as always. Fascinating.
Thank you.
Let's say goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye.
Thanks, y'all.
Let's
keep watching Mind Body Evolution on video. Take care, everyone. Until next time.